Hello, my name is Virginia Beck. I'm with your Hawaii State Legislature's Public Access Room at the State Capitol, and I'm here to present Your Voice, which is about your government. The way it works best is if you add your voice to the process, and so we're here to help you learn how to do that. So the Public Access Room is actually your office at the State Capitol. It's a physical location, 401, room 401 if you're ever over in Honolulu. We offer a wide range of resources for you. And you would think that given that in a democracy, power is vested in the people and the people need to know how to use that power, that every state in the country would have an office like the Public Access Room to help their citizens learn how to use that power. As it turns out, only Alaska and Hawaii have such full service offices in their state. Now, as I go through the presentation, there are a number of handouts that can be helpful to you, or I may refer to, there's a handout that lists the Senate and House committees, for example. You can find all of those handouts on the Public Access Room's website, which is lrbhawaii.org/PAR. Public Access Room is a nonpartisan office. We don't take any position on any issues. We help everyone who calls, emails, or comes through our doors. There's never a charge for our services because we are funded by your tax dollars. We provide lots of guidance on the process of how a bill becomes a law at the legislature, how the senators and representatives operate at the state capitol. We also provide, if you happen to find yourself in Honolulu, you can come into the office and use the computers, the workspace, pick up additional handouts, that kind of thing. We offer workshops and tutorials to help people understand the process, and if you or your group has an interest in a particular workshop, just get in touch with the Public Access Room and we'll be happy to set something up for you. We can do it remotely from Honolulu. So just to make sure we're on the same page, I like to start out with a little diagram of government. We've got 3 branches of government, and today we're talking about the legislative branch of government, the branch that makes the laws for the state of Hawaii. The executive branch is headed by the governor with the state departments underneath, and then there's the judiciary with the courts. But today we're talking about the legislative branch of government, and particularly the branch that makes the laws for the state of Hawaii. Sometimes people can get a little confused when we talk of senators and representatives, and we also have senators and representatives at the national level. And today we're talking about the senators and representatives for state government. Of course, we've also got the Maui County Council, which passes laws that affect just Maui County. One of the handouts that you'll find on the Public Access Room website is an overview of the legislature. But here I just want to mention that there are 25 members of the Senate and 51 members of the House. The senators are serving 4-year terms. The House representatives are serving 2-year terms. And so what that means is every election cycle, the entire House of Representatives is up for election, as well as roughly half the Senate. So we're the ones who put them into office. So what do the lawmakers do? Every address in the state is represented by 1 member of the House of Representatives and 1 member of the Senate. And theoretically, they are your voice in those chambers. Sometimes it's not a great match, there could be a disconnect, but they are your voice in those chambers. Additionally, they organize into different committees so that they can become experts on particular subject matter. And there, as I mentioned earlier, there are handouts on the website that show you who's on which committee in the House and in the Senate. Now, one of the things that's important about the committees, they're on different subject matters such as health and human services, or finance, or commerce and consumer affairs. So the legislation will get funneled through those committees to make sure that they can be deliberated on and really focused on to see if the legislation is what we want for our future laws. Now, who gets to be the chairs of those committees is a very important issue because the chairs of the committees have an incredible amount of power. And who gets to decide on who's the chair of the committees is leadership. And leadership is elected by the members of the House and of the Senate. So the 25 senators get together and vote on who should be their Senate president, for example. The 51 members of the House of Representatives vote on who should be the Speaker of the House. And you can imagine this is where there can be some politics that comes into sway, where if I am supporting someone for the Speaker of the House and that person does not rise to that position, then the person who did make it for Speaker of the House is probably not going to put me in a position of power because I was not one of his or her supporters. So that's one of the dynamics that happens at the power dynamics at the state capitol. Now, one of the first things that people often want to find out is who is my own representative and who is my own senator. And the legislature's website, capitol.hawaii.gov, makes it quite easy to find out. This is what the website looks like. It's there's a website guide on the Public Access Room website, but you can find your own legislators up here in the upper right-hand corner. They just want you to enter the name of the street that you live on. Just the name of the street. You don't need to put in the house number or drive, street, that kind of thing, just the name of the street. And up comes a list where you can figure out where your address falls, and there will be hyperlinks to your representative and your senator. Here we're on the Big Island, so Representative Chris Todd is our representative, and here's his page. And each legislator has a page, and it's worth taking a look if you're going to be meeting with a legislator to take a quick look at their web page. It's got their pictures so that you'll be sure to recognize them when you come into the room, and their contact information. It also has their biographical information, just a brief bio. And so much of advocating at the legislature is about building relationships. So it's worth taking a look at the bio to see if perhaps there's a point of commonality or a point that you can bring up in conversation. Maybe your auntie went to the same school as he did, something like that. Some of the buttons on the website are very self-explanatory, so I just want to mention them before we go on. There's a button called Legislators, and you can imagine what happens when you press that button. Up come the list of legislators. You can then click on their name, and up comes their page. More and more you're going to find Facebook and other social media icons next to their pictures to provide you with more information about them. Likewise, if you click on the committee button, up comes a list of all the committees. You can narrow it down to just Senate or House committees. You select one of the committees, and up comes the chair, the vice chair, members of the committee. It will also have the scope of the committee, what the committee focuses on. Of course, the most important participants in state legislative government is actually the public, people like you. We really need more voices in order to make the system work well. So one of the first things to mention is that the people who are in office are elected to be there. And so it's very important to vote. We also get to vote on proposed amendments to the state constitution. Those pass as bills, and then they'll appear on the ballot. Don't forget that you can run for office or help someone else to do that. In the public access room, rather than the electioneering, we really focus on communicating with the people who are already in office. So one of the first ways to use your voice is to actually communicate with your own representative and senator. It's always an appropriate time to do this. There may be district issues that you think need their attention, and they'll be happy to look into those for you. You may also have certain priorities that you think that they should be focusing on. Maybe not a particular law that you want to push, but perhaps something that you think they should pay attention to. So just let them know. People often ask me, is it better to write a letter or to make a phone call or to send an email? And my answer to them is yes. One of them. Just do it. Just get in touch with them. If you've sent an email and you haven't heard back from them in 4 or 5 days, very appropriate to pick up the phone and call and say, I sent Senator a message, just wondering when I might expect a reply. And certainly if you want a reply, make sure you ask for one. Otherwise they might think you're just registering your opinion or something like that. So if you'd like them to get back to you, make sure you ask for that. Now, one of the things that happens to me sometimes is that people find out I work at the state capitol, and sometimes they have, they're disappointed in the progress the legislature has made, and they'll moan and groan about why are they focused on this instead of on that, and that kind of stuff. And I'll say, well, have you actually contacted your legislators to let them know your views? And the response I get is, oh yeah, like they'll listen to me. Well, one of the things that I have found working at the Capitol is that they do pay attention to the people's voices. It does not mean that they will necessarily do what you want them to do, but they do pay attention to the voices. So, especially because not enough people speak up, your voice is all the more amplified. That said, you'll want to keep it short and simple. There's a lot of paper and a lot of correspondence running around at the Capitol. So you'll want to get to your point, and if you've got an inch thick of details on the situation in your district, that's great. The legislator may want to have that information, but perhaps provide a cover sheet that outlines what it is that's in the material. You'll want to make sure that you are courteous, even if you're not feeling particularly courteous. The whole idea is to build bridges rather than to burn them. And you want to give the legislator the opportunity to do the right thing. Give them a chance. And make sure that you add your contact information. And if you're calling the legislator, please make sure to repeat your name and telephone number so that they can get back to you. And the public access room is available to help you. And our contact information will appear at the end of this presentation or on our website. And we have been around for over 25 years, but we're one of the best kept secrets in state government. So please contact the public access room and let other people know that if they have they need help at the state capitol, there is an office just for them to provide resources for interacting. So when does all the lawmaking happen? Well, in the state of Hawaii, most of the calendar year is what we call the interim, the time between regular legislative sessions. On the third Wednesday in January at 10 a.m., they start a new regular session, and then they go for 60 session days, which takes us until late April, early May. That doesn't include weekends, holidays, and days when they've declared themselves to be in recess, where they may be having committee meetings but not convening in chamber. So we're considered a part-time legislature, which means that many of the legislators hold other positions, but they do have offices that are open year-round. So the next thing that's going to happen is in December or early January, they will issue the calendar of all of the deadlines that will have to be followed during the next regular legislative session. And the calendar is decided on by leadership. The House Speaker and the Senate President get together and decide on what all of the deadlines will be. And the Public Access Room puts together a calendar with all the definitions of those deadlines to make it a little bit easier for people. You can always find the calendar in the upper left-hand corner of the legislature's website. First thing we have is a party on opening day, which if you find yourself over in Honolulu on January 17th, 2018, please come. It's been voted one of the best free food events on the island. The legislators open their doors with poo-poos and whatnot. It's not a day for heavy lobbying, but it's a great day to come, introduce yourself, and mention what you're going to be focused on this session. So another way to add your voice to the process is to actually have an idea for a new law or a way to change an existing law. And now is a great time to be talking with legislators about ideas for new laws. Legislators will take your idea and translate it into a bill, and then the bill, if it's successful, will become an act of law. So if you have an idea for a new law, what you'll want to do is summarize the problem or the opportunity, and probably just put something down brief paragraph, some bullet points of what you think the law should do. And perhaps you know another state that has introduced similar legislation. You may want to reference that. There might be an organization that has a website with lots of information that would be helpful to the legislator as they're drafting the bill. That kind of thing. You want something that the legislator is able to grasp quite easily. And you're going to need to find a legislator to introduce your bill. In the state of Hawaii, only legislators, only representatives and senators can introduce bills. So there's no referendum or anything like that in order to change laws. So you might want to start with your own representative or senator, see if they are on board with your idea. If so, that's great. If they're not, if they're lukewarm about the idea, you'll probably want to find someone else. You want to find someone who is willing to champion this piece of legislation for you. It takes quite a lot for a bill to become a law. You might want to go to the chair of the committee that your bill will probably go through. For example, if I have a bill about bicycling, I might want to approach the chair of the Transportation Committee to see if he or she could help me with this piece of legislation, because it'll have to go through that committee anyway. If you need help with this, the Public Access Room is happy to try to do some research with you to look for members who have supported similar legislation in past sessions. And that might be a good clue that they would be a good candidate for helping you with that piece of legislation. So as I mentioned, third Wednesday in January is when we get started. So this year that's going to be January 17th, 2018. And if we look at last year's calendar, we find that generally they have a very short window at the start of session in order to introduce bills. Usually it's about 1 week. So in that week, there are several thousand bills introduced. So if you approach a legislator after opening day hoping that they will introduce a bill for you, you may be out of luck. There are limits on how many bills they can introduce. It also takes time to write a bill. They may already have their coffers full. So now is a great time, now through November, is a great time to be talking to legislators about bills being introduced. You don't need to worry about drafting the bill into the legalese and everything else. Neither does the legislator, actually. They have research agencies in the building that help them with this kind of thing. But when a bill is drafted, it's given a bill number, HB if it's a House bill, SB if it's a Senate bill, and a number that's going to stay with it for the life of its time at the legislature. It's also given a title. And the important thing about a bill's title, this one is relating to transportation, is that the bill title never changes. And the bill must always reflect its title. So the bill can change as it goes along its way, but it always has to conform with that title. So that's a very important point. The bill could be short, it could be 1 page, it could be 1 inch thick. If there's a purpose section to the bill, that'll appear at the very beginning, section 1, talking about why the bill is needed. And then it'll get into the guts of the bill, changing the Hawaii Revised Statutes, for example, actually changing the law. And then at the very end, you'll see a section that will be the effective date, the date that the law will take effect if it is enacted. That could be upon approval, when the governor signs the bill, or it could be a specific date, July 1, 2019, for example. So a lot has to happen for a bill to become a law. It's going to be referred to committees, and when it's referred to the committees, it has to pass hearings or decision-making in those committees in the order that the referrals are made. And it's during this process that we've got public hearings where the public can offer testimony. That's why we've got a disembodied ear up there. That's when they hear from the public. Now, at the same time that it's going through committees, the bill has to have 3 votes, they're called readings, on the floor of the House and the Senate. And those have to be on separate days. So what happens is the bill will go for a vote in the chamber, and then go to a committee, and then come back to the chamber, go back to committee, back and forth until those are accomplished in one chamber, and then the bill will cross over to the other chamber and go through the same procedure. Then even if it gets through both chambers, we have to make sure that the version of the bill that the House and Senate passes is identical. So only one version of the bill will then go off to the governor, who then signs it into law, allows it to become law without signature, or if the governor vetoes it, there's a mechanism for the House and Senate to override the veto so the bill can still become law. That's a high bar for a bill to go through. And it's got to do all of that by deadlines, the deadlines that appear on the calendar. And the reason they call them deadlines is because they're designed to kill bills. Out of the 2,700 or 3,000 bills that are introduced each session, roughly 10% may become law. I think last session it was just 7% became law. So that's a lot of bills that get killed as we go ahead. And we'll talk a little bit about how the process of a bill becoming a law. The first vote, well, let's pretend we've got a House bill. The first reading, the first vote on the floor of the House with the 51 members all present is no big deal. Everything passes the first vote. It's almost as though if you as my colleague think this was important enough to introduce as a bill, then I say put it in the hopper, let's get this thing going. And then what will happen is that leadership will decide which committees the bill has to go through. It could just have to go through one committee, it could be 3 committees, 4 committees, depends on the subject matter of the bill. So as soon as we find out which committees our bill has to go through, we will want to ask for a public hearing. We need to move quickly if we want to do this, because the deadlines come very, very quickly in the legislative calendar. And you'll want to go to the person with the power. So we'll be looking at the first committee that the bill has to go through and who is the chair of that committee. And you can find that information by going to the handouts on the Public Access Room website. And the person who's the chair of the committee has the power to schedule your bill for a hearing. They also have the power to not schedule your bill for a hearing. And unfortunately, if your bill does not get heard, it's going to die in committee, which is the fate of quite a lot of bills. In fact, when we look at, this is a little diagram of where bills died during the last session, and the red area, 40% of the bills died without ever being heard. So those are bills that were introduced, passed their first reading, got referred to committees, and then nothing. So that's a lot of die-off right from the start. So if you don't want your bill to be in that category, you want to get in touch with the chair of the committee and ask them to please hear your bill. If your bill does get scheduled for a public hearing, you can use your voice again by offering testimony. You'll want to testify. Offer your view on why the bill should become law. Time is always short. Know that going in. For hearings, they, in the Senate, for the first committee, they'll give you 72 hours notice. For after that, and in the House, they provide you with 48 hours notice of a hearing coming up. And they will often ask you to have your testimony in 24 hours prior to the hearing. So time is really tight. So testimony is formal communication to the committee regarding your position on a bill. You only get to offer your testimony when the bill is scheduled for a hearing. This is different than communicating with members, telling them that you are in support of a piece of legislation. You can do that anytime you want. But to offer formal testimony that will become part of the written record for that piece of legislation, you can only offer that when the bill is scheduled for a hearing. The guidelines on how to offer testimony will always appear at the end of the hearing notice. And you can sign up on the website to receive hearing notices by email so that you don't miss a chance to offer testimony. You can offer written or oral testimony on a bill. And there's no rule as to what the testimony looks like. It can be in a letter format, it can be in a memo format, it can be just a few sentences. That said, what I would suggest is to make sure you have the correct committee name. Just look on the hearing notice, it'll have the committee name clearly listed. Make sure you put in the bill number. And then put very clearly whether you support or oppose the piece of legislation. Don't make them dig for that information. Put that right up front. And then who are you and where are you coming from? Are you an expert in the field? If you're an expert, that's great, but you don't need to be. You may have a story to tell as to how this piece of legislation could affect your life, or how it affected your auntie's life, or maybe you're coming from a place of certain moral or religious beliefs that compel you to testify. Just let them know where you're coming from. And make sure you add your name. They do not accept anonymous testimony. So you can put in your written testimony in a number of different ways. More and more what they would like you to do is use the web form that's available on the capitol.hawaii.gov website, the legislature's website. You can always fax it in free of charge from any public library. So if you are one of those people who wants to write out your testimony longhand, you can still do that. Just fax it in from a public library. So the web form to submit testimony, I'll show you just how easy it is. Say I've typed up my testimony and saved it on my computer. I'll click on Sign In on the legislature's website. Now the first time you do this, you'll have to register with the website. And I think we've all become more familiar with how to register on a website. You'll just offer your email address and you create a password just for that website. And then you go to your inbox to confirm you're not a robot. And then you're in. So after that, you just click on Sign In. You'll type in your email address and your password. The buttons on the top row of buttons turn orange to show that they're activated. And you'll click on Submit Testimony. And then you'll just type in the bill number. If you ever need help finding bill numbers, contact the Public Access Room. We're very good at finding legislation. Say someone told you, oh, there's a bill on feeding feral cats and you should offer testimony. Feel free to call the Public Access Room. We'll find the bill number and the hearing for you. So type in the bill number, click on Submit, and up comes the information on the hearing, your name and email address. Then you'll just indicate whether you're testifying today as an individual or as an organization, whether you support or oppose the legislation, and whether or not you plan on being present at the hearing. And then you'll just attach your testimony file. So this is much like the way that you attach a file to an email message. You'll click on Choose File, or sometimes it'll say Upload, depending on which browser you're using. And you'll find the file on your computer, and then there it will appear. Now, if you prefer, instead of attaching a file, you do have the option of just typing your testimony under the additional comments box instead. So feel free to do that. Now, if you do that, what comes across to the committee is actually a document that just looks like a typed out email message. So there's no formatting or anything like that. So it's not quite as pretty as a Word document or a PDF that you've attached, but it still gets the job done. After you've submitted your testimony, you will be sent a confirmation email. Now you can also offer oral testimony, though this is difficult to talk about when I'm off of Oahu, because for residents of Maui, you'll have to fly over to Honolulu to do this. You can come to the committee, chair, vice chair, members of the committee. You'll want to keep it short and simple. Sometimes they do put time limits of 2 minutes on the testimony. You'll want to introduce yourself, be right up front about whether you support or oppose the legislation. You want to be courteous, respectful, and professional, even if you don't feel that way, even if it's very frustrating for you that the legislators who may know less about the issue than you do are the ones with the power over this piece of legislation. Your job is to persuade them and teach them about the issue and get them to agree with you. You want to remember to breathe. If you don't do that, you'll pass out. That's no fun. You want to tell the truth and not exaggerate. If you say, oh, this affects thousands, when actually it only affects hundreds, while you may win the day in the hearing, after that, they will not trust you again, and that's not a good thing not a good position to be in. You want to become a trusted resource so that they come to you when they're discussing these issues. So you want to find other people who can testify, colleagues, friends, family, get them to offer their testimony. You can refer them to the public access room if they need help in doing that. If you want to find organizations who might be possible allies with you, contact the public access room. Will help you research past testimony, and you can find other people who have testified on similar pieces of legislation who might be willing to collaborate with you. And don't forget to listen to the people that you disagree with, even if it sets your teeth on edge. They can often be your best teachers, and they'll give you the opportunity to let the legislators know how to respond to the people that oppose your position. So that can be very important. So now, after all the testimony has been heard, the committee can do a number of different things. They can decide to pass the bill exactly as it is, without any changes, unamended. They could also vote to pass the bill with changes. They could be little technical changes, or they could be rather significant, amended. They could also decide, we're not going to vote. We're going to hold this bill or defer it. If that's the case, then your bill dies right there in that committee. Now, who gets to decide which of these avenues they go down is the chair of the committee. Once again, the power of the chair of the committee decides on whether they're going to vote or not. And usually the members of the committee will go along with the chair. It takes some political will to go against the will of the chair. And the other thing I want to note is that of these different courses of action, one of the ones that you don't see listed here is the vote to not pass the bill. It's very rare that they will have a vote that fails to move the bill forward. Instead, they will just avoid the vote and defer or hold the bill. There are exceptions to that, usually when there's quite a bit of public attention on a certain issue. So now, if changes have happened, they may be minor or significant. Probably not so significant that a goose turns into a trout, but they can be rather large. The thing that's going to constrain how much a bill can change is that rule that the bill must always conform to its title. The title of the bill never changes, and the bill has to conform to its title. I want to mention a couple of odd things that can happen when they change your bill. One is that they could change the effective date to something way out in the future, like this bill shall take effect on July 1, 2099. This can kind of freak you out a little bit when you first see it, because here the chair had said they were in support, everything looked good, and now they're changing it to 2099, which makes no sense. The reason they're doing that is to change the bill, forcing it to go into the final negotiation process called the conference committee process at the end of session. So it does not mean that they intend to have that piece of legislation emerge and go to the governor with that 2099 date on it. It just means that they want to make sure they get their hands on that bill again, the final negotiation stage at the end of session. The other thing that you may see is the dollar signs, the dollar amounts being blacked out. So say there was an appropriation for $500,000. All of a sudden it'll be changed to be a dollar sign with a blank next to it. This is very standard. What they're doing is, and if they do have a dollar amount they want to have kept in mind as the bill moves forward, they'll put that in the committee report that accompanies the bill as it moves from committee. The reason they do this is that it reserves the actual amount to be decided upon by the Finance and Ways and Means committees near the end of session when they come to the final fiscal decking deadline, when the monies are allocated. So it's not unusual, so don't panic if that happens to you. Any changes on the bill are going to be summarized in the committee report, which is a really helpful document to take a look at. Every time a bill is changed, it's given a new draft number. In this example, SB 1, Senate Bill 1, started its life just as that, SB 1. Then it got changed in the Senate and became Senate Bill 1, Senate Draft 1, SD1. Then it got changed again while it was in the Senate, SD2. Crossed over to the House, changed, became HD1, then it changed again, became HD2. If it gets changed during the conference process, it'll be CD1, Conference Draft 1. This can look a little bit confusing, but it's really just to make sure that we're all looking at the same version of the bill. And on the bill status sheet, when you put in a bill number and come up with the status sheet, you'll always see the most recent version of the bill at the top of the page. And the description of the bill will always match that most recent version of the bill. So after we've gone through a committee or two, we'll go back to the floor for our second reading or second vote with all 51 members of the House, if it's a House bill. And there may be some debate on the floor, or it may just pass very quickly with no comment. And if our bill passes that second reading, then we'll go to our last committee. And basically just repeat the process. We go to the next committee and we'll ask the committee chair to please hear our bill. We'll offer testimony. We'll get other people to offer testimony, and away we'll go. And then once it's gone through all of the committees, we'll come back to the floor for the third reading with all 51 members. And this is when they may stand and debate the merits or the things that they don't like about the bill. And we'll usually televise the third reading, the dates that are very heavy with third reading bills. Then we've got to make sure we've gone through all of the committees in the House, say, and 1, 2, 3 votes on the House floor. Then we'll cross over to the Senate and go through the same process again. The Senate will receive the bill, it'll pass first reading, it'll get referred to Senate committees, and then away we'll go with getting them to hear our bill and having 3 votes on the floor of the Senate with the 25 members. Then, after we get through the Senate, we've still got to make sure that the House and the Senate agree on the exact wording of the bill. So if the House has voted on one version of the bill, but then it got changed while it was in the Senate and they voted on a different version of the bill, we go into what they call the conference committee process. And this happens at the end of session, and what happens is that the leadership of the House will appoint members to serve on a House conference committee just for that particular bill, say in this example HB 123, and then the Senate leadership will appoint members to serve on a Senate conference committee for HB 123, and those 2 committees will meet to try to figure out what the final version of the bill should be. Now, the members are usually the chairs of the committee that the bill has already gone through, as well as other members. The meetings are open to the public, but no public testimony is allowed. So advocacy at this stage really is contacting the members of the committees, contacting your own legislators, basically contacting anyone that you have a relationship with at the legislature to see if they can help. Because at this point in the process, it's not just this bill that has its conference committees meeting, but all the other pieces of legislation that have passed a different version in the House and the Senate have their conference committees meeting. And this is when sometimes there can be a little bit of deal making going on between legislators. So you never know what's going to affect your bill. So you just pull out all the stops and try to ask everyone for help in getting your bill through the conference committee process. Your bill can still die here if it doesn't emerge by the final decking deadline. And if your bill has any money attached to it, it's going to need to have the concurrence of the Finance and Ways and Means chairs. And so at the end of session, we have a lot of bills that are waiting for that okay from the Ways and Means and Finance chairs. And then once it's it's emerged from conference, we've got to make sure that both the House and the Senate have had the opportunity to do a final vote on that version of the bill that will go off to the governor. And it's got to have that final reading by the end of session, adjournment sine die. Then, of course, you're not done quite yet. You'll want to get in touch with the governor, who has deadlines by which he has to sign the bill into law, allow it to become law without signature, or to veto the bill. And the governor will have on his website a place for you to communicate your thoughts on pending pieces of legislation. If your bill made it through the legislative session and succeeded, you would be pretty ecstatic. It usually takes a few years to teach the legislators and to persuade them to your point of view. So we do a little bit of counseling in the public access room of encouraging people, reminding them that it's not necessarily your bill becoming a law, but just having a hearing can be a tremendous success. And not to give up, to keep going, get ready for the next year's session. Use the time between the legislative sessions in order to meet with legislators, to collaborate with allies. It's a great time to do some more research and that kind of thing. And before you know it, it's the third Wednesday in January again. And it's actually a 2-year legislative process. So the way that it works is it follows the elections. So elections took place in 2016, and we had new members elected. So at the start of January 2017, we started a new regular legislative session. And all during session, we talked about bills dying because of all of the deadlines. But actually, at the end of the legislative session, the bills that died carry over to the following year, to the start of the 2018 session. So on January 17th, when we start up again, they're going to be introducing new pieces of legislation with higher bill numbers. But in addition, any of those bills that died the previous year could come back to life right where they were when session ended in 2017. So I call them potential zombie bills because they can come back to life right from where they died. So if you have a bill, for example, that made it all the way through the Senate, crossed over to the House, and then died in that first House committee, then we don't need to worry about the first deadlines in 2018, but we can pick up that bill right where it left off. If we can convince that House chair to hear our bill, for example, we can have new life. And then at the end of the 2018 session, everything that hasn't passed out of the legislature is maca dead done. We have new elections in 2018, and we start the whole process afresh in 2019. Now, you don't need to remember all of this because you have an office at the state capitol. It's called the Public Access Room, and we're happy to help you figure out the process, how it all works, whether bills are alive or dead. It's a lot of information. So we do have our website that can be of help to you, lrbhawaii.org/par. And actually, this workshop is available on the website if you want to look at it at your own pace. It's also where you can find all of those helpful handouts on the information sheets page. You can look through past issues of the newsletter or subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out roughly once a month during the legislative session and helps to put things into perspective for you. And don't hesitate to call or email us. We can save you time by pointing you in the right direction. So if you have any hesitation, you think of something at the Capitol or something to do with state laws, oh, I ought to tell someone, don't lose that momentum. Call the Public Access Room. We'll put you in touch with who has the power over your issue at any given time. So a few last things. I just want to mention some resources that are available on the legislature's website, capitol.hawaii.gov. One of them is the Reports and Lists button that appears on that page, has a wealth of information behind it. I almost want them to star and highlight that button because it has so much information that when people are looking for something, it's one of the first places that I direct people to. It's where you can find out which bills are still alive. If you want to find out which bills your legislator has introduced, this is where you would go. It's a great way to find bills by using the subject search. So take a moment and look at the Reports and Lists button on the legislature's website. I think you'll find lots and lots of information there. When you first click on the Reports and Lists button, it'll open in this deadline tracking mode, which is where you can find all of the House bills and all of the Senate bills. Sometimes people have a hard time coming to the website and going, well, where are the bills? Where are they? Click on Reports and Lists. You'll see links to all the House bills, all the Senate bills. You'll also see links to each of the deadlines will be listed, and then there'll be links so that you can look at only the legislation that is still alive after a particular deadline, which can be really helpful. And all of the reports come to you in this nice searchable format with the description easily apparent, clicks, links so that you can go to the bill's status page to see what's occurred, easy to look at who introduced the bills, that kind of thing. You can also find out what's in a certain committee or what's come out of a certain committee. It's also got that wonderful subject search. So I would encourage you to explore the Reports and Lists button on the Capitol's website. I mentioned earlier that you can sign up for hearing notices, and it's really quite easy to do that. What you'll do is you'll sign into the legislature's website, and then the buttons turn orange. You click on Hearing Notification, and up comes this screen where you can type in one after the other every bill that, if it comes up for a hearing, you want to be sent an email with that hearing notice so that you can offer testimony and ask other people to submit testimony as well. In addition, you can subscribe by committee, which is really helpful. Say I'm into education issues. I'm really looking at these school lunch bills that I know about, so I've put in those bills that I want to be notified if they come up for a hearing. But I also want to keep a broader perspective on what the Education Committee is hearing. Maybe there are some bills that affect education that I do have an opinion on, that I don't even have on my radar. If I subscribe to hearing notices by committee, I'll have the opportunity to review each of the hearing notices that the committee puts out and be able to just quickly go through and see if there's anything I might have an opinion on or a friend or colleague might have an opinion on. And you'll want to make sure that you select the committees for both the House and the Senate, because there'll be an Education Committee in the House and an Education Committee in the Senate. And don't hesitate to contact Public Access Room if we can be of help. I want you to know that there is a measure tracking system that's available on the website, and this is helpful if you're following more than 3 or 4 bills. Basically, you create a list, you put things on it, and then you can generate a report that looks like you've worked for hours on it. So you'll sign into the website, the buttons turn orange, you click on measure tracking. When you first come here, it says create list, and sometimes people don't know what to do here. All it's asking you to do is to put in a name. You can call your list lists if you want. I'm going to call it Priority Ag Bills and click on Create List. I've created 3 different lists. Then when I've created my list, I just click on Show List and it'll show me my list. Well, right now it's empty, so it wants me to add a measure to it. So I'll put in a bill number and click on Add. And I also have the option of adding notes, which will appear as a column in my report. And then you'll click on Save after you've typed in your notes. You don't need to put in the notes if you don't feel like it. After you've added all of the bills that you want to have on your report, you'll click on Generate Report. And then in future, when you use this feature, you'll just click on Measure Tracking, Show List, Generate Report, and voila, up comes your beautiful report. I've got this one dissected just to show you that the notes column does appear as a column on your report. The nice thing is, say you're looking at 25 different bills and you looked at all of these bills yesterday and you want to find out, did anything change from yesterday to today? What you can do is you can click on the column header that says Current Status, and it will resort your report so that the legislation that's had the most recent activity will come to the top of the page. And that way you can look down and see, okay, well, this committee report's been issued, that's great, I want to take a look at it. This one passed second reading, okay, now I'm all caught up. And then you can resort your report again so that it goes back to being alphabetical. And then you can save it as a PDF document, email it off to friends and colleagues, say this is what our status is on all the bills we've been tracking. They think that you've worked so hard on this thing, and it's really been quite easy. So take a look at the measure tracking feature. If you need help, Public Access Room is happy to help. If you print it out landscape style, it looks really quite professional. Two more things. One is that archives appear online. So past sessions back to 1999, you can find legislation and the acts. So reports show up. Feel free to contact us if you need help with this. I just want you to know that it appears here. If you need to go back before 1999, the Archives Division of the Department of Accounting and General Services has a physical archives that they can help you with, and we can help you get in touch with them. The last thing is the Hawaii Revised Statutes. The 14 books of codified law in the state of Hawaii are available online. I sit with these books and I hardly ever pull them off the shelf because I find it much easier to use the version that's available online. So you can search for a word or a phrase in the law books. If I'm looking for bicycles or bicycling, for example, I could type this in and click on go. There are also links that appear underneath that search box to, for example, the table of contents of the laws, which can really help you if you're trying to figure out where would a new law fall in the books of law. That can be very helpful. There's also an index, a supplemental index, if you're having a hard time, say your search for a particular word came up with nothing. Maybe they use a different terminology. So the index is kind of like the yellow pages that can help you find that. Now, if someone said, you should look at statute number 291C-146. Okay, well, I could type that in that search box and click go, and I might get lucky. I might also end up with lots and lots of cross-references to that statute. So if you know exactly what you're looking for, it's actually easier to browse the HRS sections. And what happens when you click on Browse the HRS sections is up comes links to each of the different volumes, and you'll have to figure out which volume your chapter falls in. So 291C would fall in volume 5 between chapters 261 and 319. And then, see, this is not pretty, but it'll get us to where we want to go. We'll click on 291C, and then 291C-146, and here we go. Now we've got our statutes, and lo and behold, we find that in the state of Hawaii, there is a law saying that when you're on a bicycle, you must keep one hand on the handlebars at all times. Who knew? This is also an example of the wide range of things we're asking legislators to make decisions on. Everything from riding a bike to environmental legislation to taxation policy to education policy. They really need to have more people participate to add their voice and their expertise so that we can make good decisions on all of these things. So that was a lot of information. No known cure for the political virus. If you've watched this through the end, you've got it. This is my corny slide. Treatment is available by participating in your democracy. You're always welcome in the Public Access Room. The final thing I want to share is just another version of how a bill becomes a law. Say I've got introduced a double-decker tree swing. Great, I get it introduced. They insist on amending it in committee to a double-wide tree swing. Okay, they amend it while it's on the floor of the chamber, and it's supposed to go right through the tree, which makes no sense. Luckily, by the time it's enacted, they've decided to dissect the tree, add supports. Somebody's going to hit their head, but I guess it works. Unfortunately, it didn't get funded by the Finance and Ways and Means committees, so the poor state agency saying, well, all we can afford to do is this useless thing lying on the ground. As reported by the media, well, unfortunately, they've gotten it completely upside down. As understood by the public, not even on their radar, don't even know we're talking about tree swings. And what was actually needed was a tire swing. So this is to do a couple of things, this slide. One is to remind you to try to keep your sense of humor even when dealing with something as important as the laws of the state of Hawaii, because it will help to keep you sane. The other thing is to not be too wedded to your initial vision. If I was sure that the double-decker tree swing was the only solution, I would be blind to a much better answer of that tire swing. So that is the Your Voice presentation by the Public Access Room at the Hawaii State Legislature. Please contact us, let us know how we can help you participate in your government, add your voice to the process of making Hawaii's laws the best that they can be. And we really look forward to hearing from you. And please let us know if there's anything that you can think of that the Public Access Room should be doing for you that we're not currently doing. So thank you so much for your time and attention. Aloha.